here comes our group from Executive Cabinet. Mondays we have day of Executive Cabinet with the superintendent, so sometimes they're coming in a little late.
We decided this was more important.
Well, we're ready to go whenever you are.
Chief was talking about like the sergeant thing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. We have a step proposal for you. In the interim, I see, did the teachers have a step plan?
Years ago, we eliminated the steps in 2008, I believe.
So when it's in their contract, in the current contract that expires, it's on page 147, is that frozen?
No, it's a new hire placement schedule.
Uh-huh.
That's all that is to show, and we have an error in it now that we're going to go to try and fix, but there is, that is for when new teachers are hired, that is where they're going to fall, so that they have an idea of a new teacher coming in, this is how much you're going to make. That is not for purposes of a step schedule at all. That is the schedule for that year. We didn't change it last year, which is why we have a slight problem with it this year. But it just maintains what the hiring rate is for teachers.
So if you're a new teacher and you're just getting hired, they'll slot you in with your years of experience.
Correct. So let's say you retired in New Jersey, you have 20 years of experience. You come down here, and you'd look at that schedule to figure out where your salary would fall based on your years of experience.
Mike, you have copies for everyone?
This is nothing but exact comment because the starting salary was a little kind of more.
Wait till you come back, Mike, so it's captured on the mic, please. Go ahead.
Can I have a question? On page 148, the Appendix A, open range grandfathered and performance pay salary schedules.
Are you talking about the teacher contract?
He is.
Okay.
Yeah. What's this phrase mean? If it is further agreed that this new hire salary replacement schedule is subject to review for the time to be sure no current employee's annual base salary is less than the salary of a new hiree. So if you're bringing in a hiree at a 25-year salary, 25-year experience, it's showing their base salary should be at $62,270. So does that?
That's the plan. That's where we have a problem. There's a couple of years in there because we didn't adjust it last year. That if you were a teacher who was rated as effective over and too bad Mr. Mitchell's not here. He could speak to exactly. But there's a group of teachers who I think there's 9 of them that were hired because there's a group of teachers who have not been rated highly effective but rated effective over the course of some of our years are slightly below that by maybe about $100 or something like that. So there's 9 people who were hired in that are higher than them. We found that because the new hire placement schedule has been negotiated, that language that says nobody new hired coming in will be more than the existing employees coming in are both in there. Those provisions right now are in conflict due to a couple of years on there that we're trying to fix. It's about 9 people that we're going to be negotiating that right now with CTA. So that language is there. What it means is that we're not going to bring in somebody who has 20 years of experience who's going to make more than a teacher who's been here for 20 years.
So
that's the intent.
Right. So the intent is that if somebody has been here, let's say, and I want to see if I got it right, someone's in here 25 years, they've been teaching in the district, we're not going to bring in somebody and have your salaries be disparate.
Correct.
You want them to match exactly?
No, sir. Usually they come in slightly lower.
So what they will come in at would be less than this?
No, that's the new hires placement schedule.
Okay.
So that is only for people when they're hired. How they do that would be how Mark's shop does that. They look and pull every teacher who's been here 25 years and look at their salary. We do not have a step schedule for them at all. They are basically, and you could be here 25 years and they have very disparate salary ranges. There's a range for people who've been here for 25 years. If you've been highly effective for the last, since when did we start that? 2011 we had to do that, I think. So if you've been highly effective that whole time, your salary increases are higher than somebody who's just effective. So if they had a couple years where maybe they were, trying to think of the exact term, I always get it mixed up with what's in the evaluation. If they're developing, if they've were rated as developing. They're not unsatisfactory, but they're not effective. They're that range in between. A couple of years, they were effective a couple of years. Their salary is going to be lower than the person who's been highly effective over a year, because in 2011 we had this new plan, and they've been developing over the course of the last 9 years, adjusting the formulas, adjusting how we pay teachers, because it's very prescribed. There's a formula, and it's if you are effective, you can only make, is it 75% of what the highly effective makes? I leave it to the math people to understand that.
Between 50 and 75% of the highly effective.
Right. So there's a whole mathematical formula we have to use. So to say that if they're 25 years, they're all making this amount, that's absolutely not true.
Well, they wouldn't be necessarily making less than what the entrance, what's on here.
Like I said,
Besides
they
those 9.
shouldn't be, but there are right now. There are, because we haven't adjusted that. We didn't adjust the new hire salary schedule last year. So there are some people who were hired in at a higher rate than what's on that schedule, or than what people currently here have at that range of experience.
So Officer Lynch handed you out a proposal. Mike, you want to give us the genesis of that and what your thoughts are?
This is a 10-year step plan. The numbers may be off a little bit because of the starting salary may be a little bit adjusted from when I did from where I got this information from. So, but the actual $44.51 an hour on the 10th year comes up to for our top out of $76,000. What it is now. So it's basically a 5% raise starting in your second year, and till you get to your 10th year, and then in your 10th year it'd be your 11th year, you'd be topped out.
So let me get this straight. You're proposing that we provide a 5% increase every year to your unit after their first year or after their second year?
That's what a standard step plan is you're going to get a percentage every year.
Well, I understand that, but what you're proposing is a 5% increase every year. And then at 10 years they cap out and there's no more raises?
It's 5% between steps.
Yes.
I understand that. So, but if you're guaranteeing everyone a step every year, it's a 5% increase every year.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's for the officers, and as I wrote underneath, I didn't put anything for the sergeants because right now sergeants are only a lateral transfer. It's not even a promotion.
Yeah, sergeants are a special assignment, it's a supplement. It's not a position.
Correct. Well, since we're getting into a new police department, you go. Everywhere you go, a sergeant's a promotion. It's not a lateral transfer. They're not detectives. They just can't walk in the door and take their stripes off, and say you're done. It's a promotion. Here, it's not a promotion.
Here, it's not a promotion, and you'll see it. You saw in our proposal, there's not an intent to make it a position. It's still a special assignment. It's a supplement.
No, I get it, but I think our proposal eventually is going to be to make it a promotion. I mean, We're changing. Things are getting different, becoming different here now. So, that's why we're looking at different ways. We're trying to become more compatible with outside agencies. And these are some of the first steps that we believe that should be taken, to get us there. I'm looking at that step plan for the teachers. I mean,
it's not a step plan.
Well, okay, the placement. So if we did something like that and we all came in and put ourselves in a spot with experience
that's
too, though.
That's not how it works, though. They come in at a rate for when they're hired.
Okay.
Now, the people who work here the plan is for that to be a little higher for those people who have been working here. So there isn't an incentive for people to say, well, then I'm going to quit. I'll come back under the teacher contract. If they resign, they have to sit out 60 work days. They sit out 60 work days, they come back, they'd be at a higher rate. That is not our intent, so that's why this schedule is the way it is for a placement schedule. But for being here, there's not a step schedule. It's based on performance. They get raises. We're statutorily required. We cannot give raises based on seniority. We can only give them based on performance. We can give a small cost of living, but that's limited in what we can do with that. But for the most part, under the law, we can only provide teachers compensation based on their performance.
This teacher's framework that we're talking about recognizes longevity.
No, sir. It only recognizes years of experience. It has nothing to do with longevity in the system.
A 25-year teacher, the intent is to have them paid at a higher rate.
Based on their years of experience, yes, when they walk in the door. Those people, once they're in here, that is a salary placement. They're placed here, and what their raises are is based entirely upon their performance. They do not get, if you come in, if you have a teacher who's rated unsatisfactory, they're going to get a cost of living, and our cost of living has been, I think, like 0.5% is what we've given to the teachers. So it's a very de minimis amount that they're raised up as a COLA, but we can't put them on a step schedule. They cannot have it under the law. The law specifically states you cannot give raises to teachers based on seniority.
We use the teachers because the theme throughout the years has been the teachers are the tail that wags the dog. So we use them as an example, but they're not directly comparable. I mean, the teachers don't wear bulletproof vests and all of these other things. So we recognize there are some differences.
But you're trying to make it seem as though teachers are on a step plan, and they're not.
Well, I'm trying to do what I've been receiving for a long time, which is make them the same sometimes, but they're different other times.
Okay. Have you cost out this proposal
I
to
have
determine
not.
how much this would cost?
Nope.
Okay. Do you have any intent to do that, but I'm sure Mr. Burke and we can find somebody who might be able to cost that out for you. Because, I mean, you're making a proposal, and
Sure.
we need to know how much it's going to cost.
You're welcome to cost it out, certainly before you
That
present
would be
it,
great.
right? You're going to present it to the board, are you
Well,
not?
we're certainly going to present it to the board. We
Right.
have to have it cost out before we can do that. But what you're asking is a 5% guaranteed raise every year for 10 years.
5% between steps. That's the way it works at other
And you
boards.
would-
We're trying to make it
Well,
reasonable to be able to top out, instead of being over 30 years before you can even come close.
Right, and we had this discussion
I know,
last
and
time,
I
and I
get that.
still don't understand the need to top out, because then they don't get the raise added to FRS. They get
But
it
here's
as a
the problem,
bonus.
they're not getting anything more than that anyway, so what's the difference?
But we've been giving a 3% increase minimum for several
Well, if
years
I'm-
now, so that goes to their hourly rate, so they are getting something. When they go to overtime, they're getting more money.
So if a guy was topped out after, say, 10 years,
Okay?
okay, versus not being topped out for 30 years, which would you think he'd rather have, the top out here, or wait 20 additional years to get to the top out?
Well, I'm not quite sure I understand the concept. What you're saying then is that after you've worked here for 10 years, you're not making any more money.
No, I didn't say
At 10
that.
years, you're done.
No, you know how step plans work. I mean, everything is going to go up. Salary caps are going to, the top outs are going to go up eventually.
Well, eventually, but what happened with the teachers is they had a step, and how the steps disappeared is they had a step schedule back in the early 2000s and before that. And around the Great Recession, the salary went to impasse, and the steps were frozen, and they were not guaranteed every year. So we did have a step plan, but it was not used. So I don't know why we would go back to a plan that is setting us up to where we could not meet these promises under the step plan that we're making to officers who think in 10 years I'm going to be making X amount of dollars. And so then at that point, if we get hit with what Mr. Burke can talk to you about, or Ms. Knust, about this FRS bill that they have right now that could cost us an enormous amount of money, if something like that happened, we'd have to go to impasse with every group, because if we had these kind of promises made, we couldn't keep them. There'd be no possible way.
We're giving false promises out by putting a number up there anyway, aren't we? When you
No.
put a top out number of 76,000, somebody came up with it.
Right, but it's a maximum. It's not, and I
But
just really
so
don't
basically then
understand.
it's false hope then? Is that better?
No, sir, I don't
You'll
see
never
it
reach
that way. But if you want to reach a point where you're now going to harm your employees, I don't understand the
How does
argument
that
you're
harm
making.
them to get to a higher number?
Okay, because I'm at
Give
that
them an
higher
opportunity
number.
to plan for their future and
Okay.
plan for their families.
I get it, but what I'm telling you is based on the way we get our funding, we can't make those promises that I would not tell anybody to rely on that to say, in 10 years, this is what you're going to be making. This is what we'd like you to be making. But in 10 years, if the state cuts our funding, that's not what you're going to be making. So I think it's a false promise to give to employees, first off. But secondly, to say that it's important for somebody to top out doesn't make sense to me on an employee that gets overtime, because then you top out and any overtime would then be paid at last year's rate after you top out, and then you're still topped out because we can't raise the max, or we negotiate, we're only raising it 1%, which is what we do with everybody else's contracts. We don't raise them. If we give a 3% raise, we don't always raise the max 3%. We may only raise it 1%. We may only raise the bottom 1% because that's the funding we have. So it doesn't make sense to me that you want your officers to tap out so they can just say, hey, I'm at the top of the salary schedule.
It's not just
but
a
it
say.
harms
It's because,
them financially.
It's because you want to make money. That's the whole idea.
But they won't be making money if the
So I'm
max
going to make
doesn't.
$50,000 versus $76,000. I'd rather stay at $50,000 because I don't want to top out because I don't want to go over the top.
No, what
Come on,
you're-
that's silly. I mean, right now, that is absolutely silly that we're even talking about that.
Okay, well, see, I don't understand. You're assuming that the top continues to rise, and what I've told
I didn't
you is the
assume that,
top's
though.
not.
Wouldn't you rather see a guy be at the top out of $76,000 for 10 years, or be at $50,000 trying to get to that for the next 20 years? We got guys that are here 30 years that are not topped out.
But I guess
So would you rather him be staying below the top out for 30 years? We're at the top. I don't get it.
I don't think we understand each other's arguments, which is a problem. I'm not sure how I can get you to understand where I'm coming from, and I don't understand where you're coming from. It seems like what you're saying is that if we create this max and then we just push everybody up there, everybody's going to be happy and going to stay there at that max. And to me, that's artificially raising that rate. And then they're stuck there, so their hourly rate for 10, 15 years is never going to change. Their hourly rate's going to stay the same.
But you're saying that it's not going to change.
But we
How
are
do you know
moving.
It's not going to change 15 years from now.
Because we are moving it. We're moving it incrementally. But if you've noticed in the other bargaining units, we don't always, what I'm trying to explain it, we don't always raise the max and the minimums at the same rate we're raising everything else.
And I understand that. But who's to say 15 years down the line we're not talking about something different, and we are talking about moving it up?
But who's to say 15 years from now that your officers aren't going to be in here furious because you told me I'd be making X and we're not there?
First off, they're not going to be furious, but
The framework of the police department is changing. We recognize that there are more spots here than there have been in the past. It's not necessarily a place where retired officers from other states come to go out to pasture, okay? Not saying that it was in the first place, but I recognize the mindset. This needs to come in accord with the more traditional police departments. I mean, certainly you're hiring more people, more new hires, more young officers. We were talking about more police cars. So it tells me that you need to change with the times a little bit. Mr. Burke, you sent me this FRS notice. I don't know what it is.
I can explain that.
Okay.
It's a good illustration of why we are hesitant to go into like multi-year commitments around our budget. The school district's dependent on the legislature and the governor each year. That's what determines our funding. If we go back the last several years, we've averaged about a 1.5% increase to our revenue. And we've been able to negotiate basically 3% settlements on average over that same time span per year. And that takes some work to get to 3% when the state's only giving you 1.5 or so. This step schedule would be it'd be very dangerous for the district to enter into this because it's committing to over 5% a year. You'd have your officers hitting their maximum salary in 10 years, I presume, with 10 steps. Normally, even when we had schedules years ago, before we were mandated by the legislature to get away from them for our teachers, typically you would see people teachers would top out at 25 years, and then they'd have 5 years because everyone's interested at the time in getting their 5 years in the FRS, their high 5 by 30, and then they're positioned well for retirement. You know, with police, you can, I think, retire at 25 years, so maybe you would max out at 20 years.
We're engaged in good faith bargaining. I mean, I'm open to counter proposals.
Mr. Burke is trying to explain where we are and this FRS proposal that he sent
I'm
to
having
you.
a discussion with him.
We are here to bargain in good faith, right? I just want to be up front with you that this would be a very difficult. sell to go to a step-based schedule for any one of our groups because we've just moved away from them over the last several years.
I remember.
But anyway, the thing I sent you about the FRS is a good illustration of why we can't really take for granted what our revenue is going to be each year, and are we get saddled with additional mandates or additional cost. So with the FRS, Florida's got a pretty good pension fund. It's saying the latest report is it's 84% funded. But there's a concern. So they do actuarial studies. They have to look out, 50 plus years into the future. And right now, the pension fund is based on an assumption that they will generate a return on their investments of greater than 7%. It's around 7.3%. The actuaries have said that's too high. You need to work towards a goal of 6.5%. And just a modest reduction, which has been proposed by the legislature for this year, to move that rate of return down, I think from 7.3 to like 7.1, is a $233 million impact to school districts across the state, and $15.5 million or maybe potentially more to Palm Beach County schools. And why we're so concerned about that is the legislature says, look, this is important. We got to shore up the pension fund. We want to keep Florida's pension fund, in good shape. But they're not really giving us money to pay for this increase. The House has proposed a $50 increase to the base student allocation. The Senate's proposed $40. This FRS increase is about a $73. If you looked at what that would cost in terms of per student, it's $73 to $75. So we're looking at being kind of underwater right out of the gate with our budget for next year if this comes to pass.
And they've already done the 7.3 to 7.1? Because I know that for a while it was a trend to do, and they found out that it wasn't necessary to do. A lot of other cities have gone to that too, and it's really cost them a lot of money, and they're finding out that it was probably not the right thing to do.
Well, this has been kicking around for a while, but this is the state retirement system, so it's up to the legislature on what to do. Whatever they decide, we're stuck with. We don't have any flexibility.
I get that. It hasn't passed yet.
And it looks like, we've been accustomed, the last several years, we've seen like smaller adjustments. Like last year, we had to put about $2.5 million more into the pension fund. The year before that, it was like $3 to $4 million. So we've kind of expected these marginal, like kind of smaller increases. But this year, with both the House and the Senate in alignment on this issue, and I'm hearing more from the people in charge of the pension fund saying, look, this cannot be overlooked any longer. They need to do something about it or risk a downgrade to the pension fund. So we're starting the buzz we're hearing back from Tallahassee is the likelihood of this going through is great. And right now our advocacy alert, that we're sending around to everyone, including the community, is to say, okay, that's good. We want to protect our pension, but if you're going to do this, legislature, please give us some more money to help pay for it so that it doesn't compromise everything they want to do in terms of teacher pay. And that's the other thing. We talked about teachers. I think teachers are the dog. I don't know if they're who's the wagon who, but in this district, our core mission is to serve the students, and there's a lot of legislative focus this year on increasing teacher pay. So I expect to see most of any new money we get next year tied to raising not just teacher pay, but the starting teacher salary. That's the main focus. The governor said he wants a starting salary of $47.5, and you've got both the House and Senate laying out different proposals that put tie a bunch of our potential funding to that effort. So next year is looking to be a tough budget year, and that's why we would be really, I think, nervous about entering into type of agreement that obligates the board to an automatic salary increase. We did have that years ago with our teachers' contract. Their steps were they were averaged about 2%. And then the other thing that just became a problem with steps over the years is when you got to the bargaining table, once they became automatic, they were kind of discounted as that didn't count towards a raise. They'd say, okay, we got our step, of course, but what kind of raise are we going to get this year? And so that became a challenge when you're not getting a lot of new money to work with. So I think I'm in a good place to stop the conversation for now.
I have a question.
Sure.
The last 10 to 15 years, what is the district average salary increase by percentage to this union? 3%? Would that be correct?
I'd have to do a little homework to go back 10 or 15 years, but I can tell you the last 5 years. Well, the last 4 years.
Last 5 years.
You guys had, I would say, I know all the other groups, excluding police, were 3% packages. You guys did have a 5% deal 2 years ago.
The 5% wasn't for everyone.
But you gave up a few
we
things.
gave up, so we
for at
funded
least
most of it.
temporarily.
All right, so averaging, would it be safe to say 3% increase for the last 10 years to this
Not
union?
10 years, because the recession.
Well, 1 year, that's right. 1 year, we got a 3% increase, and they made us pay 3% into our FRS. So that year, it became a wash. We got nothing.
Governor Scott made you pay the 3% into your FRS.
Either way, we're paying. We
but
paid it.
We can bring that back to the table. I've got a history, and I'll try to look while we're sitting here, but there were some lean years from 2008.
If you could go back 10 years, that would be
I just want to bring out a point because you keep not you but the other side keeps reiterating that that's 5%. It's 5%. It's 5. What's the annual? What's the federal inflation?
Inflation is hovering around 2%, I believe.
2 to 3% average per year.
Again, you got to look. There were some years where there was no inflation, but in recent years, I think 2% would be a fair estimate.
Okay. So if we're getting a 3% increase and 2% is the cost of inflation, what's this union actually getting for their officers? 1%? So it's not like
and you guys have structured things differently.
I just wanted to get that out nice and clear. Because it makes it sound like the way you repeat the 5%. Oh, you're asking for 5%. You're asking for 5%. But you're trying to make us sound greedy, not you in particular, but you're trying to make this union sound greedy. In reality, if the average cost of inflation goes up 2 to 3%, between 2 and 3% a year, which is the average, and we're asking for a 5% increase, we're only asking really beyond the cost of inflation a 2% increase for our members that put their lives in the line every day. I just wanted to bring that up.
I think what we're trying to do is just continue to provide some context around it because we don't set our own tax rates. And I point this out all the time. The county has had the same tax rate, same millage rate that they've levied for, I believe, 8 years or more. And they benefit when the property values go up. So the property values go up 5% a year. They potentially have 5% more in revenue to work with. And that helps them balance their budget. Our legislature sets the majority of our tax rates for us, and they've been committed to tax cuts. So we roll back the largest portion of our millage is rolled back each year, which takes money off the table potentially that is there. Florida has the last 20 years have been tough on education funding in our state. If you go back to 2006, 2007, Florida was 36 in the country. We're now at 45th in the country as of 2017, which is the last year, the latest data that's available. So we're moving in the wrong direction. That's why we did the referendum to do something about teacher pay and to double the size of our police force and all that. But our funding limitations are very real. And so that's why, we don't look at one unit in isolation. I mean, you guys are becoming a bigger unit than you were in the past, but it sets expectations. I think our teachers, heads would blow off their shoulders if they found out we gave back a step deal that they could never be entitled to under Florida law, and it was worth, 5% a year or whatever would be negotiated. It would be very, very difficult to try to get traction with that type of proposal.
I recognize the constraints. I do.
Okay.
I've heard the arguments before. I recognize the realities of them. I need your side to recognize the dangers of the inherent dangers of this job and the value that comes with. Kevin, did you have to have something you want to say?
Yes, just a couple of quick things, and because for our members who are watching at home, who made reference to retired teachers, I just want to read verbatim. Comes out of the Division of Human Resources, payment for teaching experience into the record. Retired teachers returning to teaching, parentheses, retired from Florida or elsewhere, who are reemployed as teachers may be placed up to $46,200. So that's pay for experience. The second thing is that we have one member presently at the top salary rate or maximum. He's in the drop and is going to retire within months, so then we're not going to have anybody. Thirdly, yeah, correct. He's the highest paid. Thirdly, the step plans in Palm Beach County for police departments are from 7 to 12 years. We keep hearing that we are going towards being a traditional police department. So if that is the way we are going, so therefore we're trying to see what our peers in the county have. And then lastly, in regards to a step plan, which I gleaned from the Miami-Dade County Public School District contract between the school district and FOP, I have in front of me something that reads the following. School police salary schedule, 12 months, 260 days, effective such and such date, and it has a 8-year step plan. So I just want to bring this to your attention because my question is not to be disrespectful, is if a county to the south of us that has their own school district police has such a plan, just a question, maybe that's something we should have. I'll make copies or give you copies you can see at the break for your information. But
And they get their funding from the same place, too, correct?
They do.
yeah, and additionally, I'd like to point out something I won't hold in my back pocket anymore, is they got additional raises, which you can research, pursuant to the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act. They got an extra 5% raise, which when you go through their contract, which you have in a moment, you will see that as well. So they have additional salary increase beyond that.
Would you be also to provide me maybe with how much the top out has increased over the last 10 years also?
We can certainly do that.
Please, thank you.
Were there not monies that were specifically earmarked from the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act?
They were to hire new police officers and for equipment and to harden the campuses. They were not meant to be used to provide salary increases to existing officers.
What about security for the schools?
That's what I mean by equipment, new officers, and hardening the campuses.
So metal detectors.
I don't know if there were metal detectors specifically.
I guess there's two buckets. There's a safe schools categorical, which is part of our operating revenue, and that was increased after Stoneman Douglas with the specific requirement that the money had to go to adding additional officers. You couldn't just pay the existing officers more money. You had to add staff because we had the mandate to get one per school. And then there's been 2 rounds of state grants for campus hardening, and that's where that can be anything from more cameras to locks to gates, single point of entry. So we apply for those grant funds. It can't go towards salaries, but it can go to just campus hardening, and then that takes many forms.
We say 2 different buckets. What are the percentages in each bucket?
So, I need to go back and do the math, but the safe schools categorical for our district is a little over $10 million, and that's the share the district gets to keep. The charter schools get their share based on their enrollment, and they're about 11% of our enrollment. But, that safe schools categorical grew, I think, from around 6 to 10 million, but we're spending about $60 million a year now to run our school police department. So, and we've always spent, even before the go back 5 years, bless you, we were spending more than $20 million a year to run it. We've always, in Palm Beach, we've always spent above and beyond what the state's provided. So, when the state provides a little more money, it's usually we've already gone above and beyond.
All right, so I have $10 million for this safe schools categorical, and the other one was the hardening. What's the number there?
There's been 2 rounds. I think it was about $6.5 million the first year, and then the next year it's about $3.4 million or three and change.
So another 10, roughly, for both rounds.
Yeah, and the grants for hardening are one-time allocations. The categorical to safe schools money comes in each year, but again, we spend far beyond that.
Fellas, you have anything else?
Well, I have some answers from some questions that you left on the table last time. So there was a discussion about whether officers are required to stop in their vehicles if they see something. So we looked into what the mutual aid agreements were, and the request for aid comes from the jurisdictional authority. It doesn't come from the officer on the street. It comes from the jurisdictional authority. So the officer cannot initiate aid. The officer is required to take action if there's imminent threat to life, but that action need only be to pick up the radio and say, this is what I see. At that point, the jurisdictional authority can give that officer authority to go in and do what needs to be done as part of their role as a police officer, but it can't be officer-driven. So it can't be that one officer making the decision that I'm going to go in and I'm going to stop this in progress. They have to call it in and get permission from the jurisdictional authority under the mutual aid agreements to do that. But I wanted to point out to you, there's a case called Garcia versus City of Hollywood, and Larry, I'll give you the site. It's 966 Southern 2nd 5. It's from 2007. This is the basis by which we need to have that non-owner vehicle insurance. In that case, there was a police officer who was going in early, well, for your membership. Police officer driving into work or an hour early to study for the lieutenant's exam, hit a child or a minor and caused injury. And so, of course, the parents were suing the city. And under this decision, the decision was that the officer was not working at the time that the child was hit. He was in full uniform. He was going to work to do work. And the court said, no, he's on his own time. So just in very simplistic terms. So that's the reason why you need that insurance, is because even if you're driving in here and you're not stopping to get your dry cleaning, you're stopping to get a cup of coffee, the district cannot, under this statute, defend you. That the requirements, the liability is on you as the officer for being in that accident, even though you're fully dressed, going to work. Under this court, that they were not working at the time of the accident. So that's the reason why you need to have that insurance.
I have a question. We're a little bit in a different situation, uniquely, because we're required, not all of us, but let's just use the call-out unit, so the detectives that are on call. To be on call, you're required to bring your equipment home, which
Correct.
is your vehicle and your equipment, your gun, your uniforms. So if we're being required to bring our equipment home, vehicle being part of that equipment, how are we not covered from point A to point B? I can understand the frolicking,
Right.
if you get caught in McDonald's parking lot and you got into it. But you're traveling from point A to point B. Part of your job description is to bring your equipment home so you can respond rapidly at a reasonable time. And now you're not covering us for bringing the equipment home, which we're required to do?
What I'm trying to explain to you is it's not us. It's the law says that we cannot.
I understand that law.
And this is,
but that law is a little bit
hold on.
specific.
It's
different.
not different. This is the City of Hollywood's police officer. In fact, I think they had a stronger argument than you will in this case, because this officer was traveling within his own jurisdiction when the accident occurred. It is not that you're on school district property when the accident occurs. So in this case, I think you're at greater risk than this case. This isn't a decision that's being made lightly here at the district. This is case law out of the 4th District Court of Appeals in the state of Florida. The Florida Supreme Court denied cert and wouldn't hear the case, so it stands as what it is. And in this case, we cannot defend you if you're in an accident, because you are not within the course and scope of your duties if you get into that accident. So I'm just pointing out, you wanted to know where it came from. We did the research. I got this from our legal department and from our risk management department. This is why they're asking for it. It is for your protection. And that's why we're asking it based on a case out of the 4th District Court of Appeals.
Okay. And then the other question is, an officer leaving one place of one school and going to another school for detail.
If you are on duty and you're driving your vehicle, and let's say you're stationed at D.D. Eisenhower and you're driving to Jupiter High, I would imagine you're covered, but you would need to talk to your lawyers over there to make sure of that. I don't know that to be true after reading this case. This case really surprised me. So you would need to talk to your own lawyers. The reason why we're asking for it is because the district legal team and the risk management department believe that you would not be covered if you're driving this and it's not while you're on duty. So if it's a detail, and by detail you're saying this is like an extra duty after, so I'm not sure if you'd be covered in that case. That's why that non-owner insurance would be so important.
That brings up another issue that myself and a lot of members have been having. They can't find insurance that will cover them. So what's the district going to do to assist these officers that can't find this coverage?
Well, I'm finding that surprising only because when I talked to the chief and the deputy chief, they didn't have any problem with getting the coverage. So I will ask them which insurance policies they're using, and we'll get that back to you.
Are they receiving a stipend also for theirs?
I don't believe so. I think they have a vehicle, but I'm not sure. What do you mean by a stipend? That they get extra money
Yeah,
to
to
drive
pay
a
for the
district
insurance.
vehicle?
We're not paying for anyone's insurance.
But here's
Regardless of rank.
Correct.
Regardless of rank.
Yes.
Go ahead, Ken.
However, I was aware of that case that you brought forward. However, still to this day, there are other agencies that this union represents that do not pass that on to their members to take up that for that fee. You know what I'm trying to say? Is that the other agencies in this county, they assume that fee and don't require their officers to go get that additional insurance. I just want to make that point. So actually, it's up to the employer.
And that's true, but we went through this before, and I gave the dates to your negotiator that we attempted to talk to you about this back in March of 18 to try and get you to get it in your contract prior to board policy being enacted. The board policy is what requires it. There's nothing in your contract that says that you don't have to pay for it. So we were hoping to negotiate it so that you could either understand these are the terms that are coming before the board, or you could negotiate something better. And we were told at that time you weren't interested for whatever reasons, whether it was because of the money we put in there, but you didn't want to even negotiate that. So then that's fine. So, but it's now a school board policy, and that's our agency rules that are adopted through the Administrative Procedures Act, and it was adopted in March of 19, a year after we proffered it to you. So it is now board policy. It is required of all employees unless it says something different in their collective bargaining agreement. And your collective bargaining agreement is silent, which means it's a management right, which means it defaults to board policy. And this is what board policy says will happen to any individuals who are driving a district-owned vehicle.
And this is just, I know the answer to this. This is just for our members. If it is in a collective bargaining agreement, that supersedes an employer's policy, correct?
It can.
It does, okay?
In most of our board policies, it does state that if it is in the collective bargaining agreement, the collective bargaining agreement
Correct.
will prevail.
Right.
However, this language is not in your collective bargaining agreement. Therefore, it's a management right, and it defaults to board
Correct.
policy.
That's why we call it negotiation, not to be disrespectful. And then the second thing is, and this is what our membership, I'm going to use an example, okay, is the following. We go off-duty in our vehicle, all right? This is my membership asking. So based on what they said, I turned my radio off. I said, I can't tell you what to do. But I'll tell you what I did. I left here after the last round of negotiations. As I'm heading down Forest Hill Boulevard, I hear a lieutenant ask for police assistance from everyone who is on code 10118. So if I was like what some members did, my radio would have been off. I never heard of it. What that meant is that they needed officers to search Dreyfus School of the Arts for a missing endangered student. Okay? So what did I do? I'm a cop. I go to the scene. I help out. And I'm glad that I did because there was only one officer and his partner in training there. So I went and I did my job like most of my members would do. But we need a clarification because people are stating they don't know what is right and what is wrong. And they're very frustrated. And sometimes I do, and I walk out here that I can't get my questions answered. And this is a simple question. When officers are leaving their place of employment, their respective school or whatever, and they're going home in their department vehicle, are our radios on or are they off?
It's my understanding they're to stay on, but you would have to look at your general orders. I'm not familiar with your general orders as well as you are. It's my understanding they would stay on, and that way you can get callback. If you're called back, then you're on duty. You're en route to a scene on duty. But what we're talking about is we're talking about taking the car to and from work. You're not being called back in. You're just driving to work. Let's not even go on that. I'm picking up my dry cleaner. I'm getting a
Yeah.
cup of coffee. This is I'm
thank you.
driving to work under the City of Hollywood case, which was a City of Hollywood Police Department, the police officer. The court said he was not acting in his scope and course of his duties when he ran the kid over in the crosswalk.
And then just to read into the record, which is contrary to what we're hearing, General Order 11.01, off-duty enforcement activities. Members who are operating department vehicle while off-duty shall not enforce minor traffic infractions or conduct traffic stops unless a crime of violence has been committed or the officer is accompanied by an officer from the jurisdiction where the violation has occurred. So that's saying
That's
here.
not different than what I told you about the mutual aid agreements.
Yeah, but no, it is slightly different because this is saying that if the officer witnesses a crime of violence, whether he is by himself or with the officer for the other agency, can take appropriate police action.
You still need to call it in, according to what I was told by the deputy chief. You would still need, under the mutual aid agreement, to call it in and get permission from the jurisdiction.
Then
I can't speak to the general orders, like I said.
Then they
I
might
speak to
wanna
the collective bargaining agreement. Your general orders are issued by your chief. You guys know those better than I would.
No, and my contention is the following, is that there are orders do not reflect what you're stating the statute is. That's
It's
what I'm
not a
bringing.
statute. It's apparently
No,
mutual
there-
aid agreements.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I apologize. I meant that. And also the fact with the court case you had indicated. So there's questions out there that we need to be answered so officers will perform to the level that they're supposed to, professionally and legally.
Well, I'm sure as the chief is hearing this, he may feel that there's some communication out to the officers that need to be made.
I
Yes.
think they're getting conflicting messages.
Big time.
Okay?
That's not to be disrespectful. It's just to be able to set the record straight. It's either A or it's B. That's all it is. We just don't want it to be gray because you know what happens when things in the gray? Our members are going to be left out to dry. That's what we're here for, is represent them.
Okay.
You have other responses from last week?
I do. In 17.1A, you talked about, you requested time and a half for more than 8 hours per day. That's problematic. It's also expensive in that we're not sure it would be workable for the school district in that we occasionally do those 10-hour work days, 4 days a week. So if the trainings over the summer were determined that there were going to be 4-day work weeks at 10 hours, and I don't know that that decision's been made or not, but it's an option on the table. If they determined that's what they wanted to do, then every day an officer would be getting 2 hours of overtime when they haven't reached 40. We're more comfortable with staying within the FLSA requirements, and it's 40 hours, and that's what we would like to maintain. So then with 17.1 little I with comp time, I got to tell you, I was really surprised, and it may have come across that way with finding out that your officers are permitted to determine that they want comp time at the time that they're taking that detail or extra duties. For the rest of the district, and it's a provision, an exception to the FLSA specifically for school districts and the like, public agencies, in that we can require our employees to fill out a form. And so for the rest of this district, there's a form that they fill out and they check whether they want comp time or overtime. And it's a one-time form and it's done. And they determine at the beginning of their employment that they want comp time. They check that I want comp time, the form goes into their system. Now, I believe that they can change that, but they can't change it per job function. Like, I'm going to need the comp time because I have a doctor's appointment next week, so I'm going to take this as comp, but the next detail I take is overtime. So it shed a little light onto us as to why sometimes your overtime is a little complicated for us to figure out, and that would be why. So we're looking at that. Problem right now because we were not, as a district, and I know police were aware that this is what was going on, but the district folks that handle the payroll and the like were really surprised that that's how it functions in school police. So we're looking at that because we may need to clean that up a little bit so that it's easier to calculate and anticipate what your overtime is going to be for the year. It makes budgeting very much easier. At this time, we're not really interested in increasing the numbers based on the arguments we heard. It sounded like it's almost like you're trying to accrue comp time as some type of deferred payment at the end of the year by increasing that amount, because the way you take overtime is very limited into 3-hour blocks of time. With our teachers, they're not eligible for overtime, so they get comp time for certain things that they do, and they're limited to a certain number of hours. And they can only take that time on a teacher planning day or on a day when students are not in session. So it would be at the preschool days. It wouldn't really be at preschool because theirs doesn't roll over. So it would be at the end, that last day at the end of the year they could take it, and they could take it on teacher planning. But they're not allowed to take it when students are in session, and they're not allowed to take it on professional development on days where they're being trained. So we're trying to get our arms around the fact that you guys even accrue comp time. It was our understanding, really, that most of what you earned was overtime. So we are going to be looking at that, but at this point, without having hard data as to how much comp time is being accrued and lost at the end of the year, we don't know that we really need to increase that number to 60 and then roll it over from year to year. We don't do that with any other groups. It gets paid out in August of every year. So we'd want to find out from the department, your department, on how comp time is accrued, how many officers have comp time in the bank at the end of the year, and get some hard analytic data on what the problem actually is, rather than just creating another form of deferred payment, because that makes it very difficult for our finance people and budgeting purposes to have something like that rolls over.
What's the problem, though? I'm trying to figure that out. You keep saying that there's a problem.
Well, the first problem is that we were not aware that you guys just pick comp time from moment to moment. Okay, this hour I want is overtime. This job I want is comp. Is the people who the operations section were not aware that that was how the school police department was actually functioning. Like I said, for everybody else, you select.
But we're a different department, too, though.
Well,
we do things
and I
a
get
lot
it,
different.
but
But here's the problem, though, from every single thing that we do is being compared to the teachers. We're not
course
the
it is.
teachers, though.
But we are a school district.
I
We are
understand
here
that, though.
for the purpose of educating children. That's our main mission.
I understand.
So that is going to be our driving force in everything that we do. And what we give to you, if we give you more than what we give to other groups, we are going to be asked by other groups, we want that as well. So we have to be cognizant of the whole picture, not just your unit. Your unit is still smaller than the SEIU unit. It's still smaller by significantly smaller than the teacher unit. So when we give you something, if the teachers come back and right now you have bereavement leave, they do not. They want bereavement leave, and we're telling them absolutely not, because the cost it would cost us to get there. So we do compare you, but there are things in your contract that you have that no one else does.
But their teachers' contracts are similar to other teachers' contracts in the state. The bus drivers are the same as the other bus drivers in the state. All we're trying to do is be compatible with other police agencies. That's
But see,
it.
that's not a correct comparison. What you need to be is comparing is other police agencies that work for school districts, and there aren't that many. There is Miami-Dade.
I just did
Okay,
with the
so
step plan.
Miami-Dade does run things significantly different than us. There are things that they do financially that we would never do. So
Maybe we should.
they're a little riskier with some of the things that they choose to do. We're going to look at the Miami-Dade contract, since you've pointed it out to us, and we will look at it and compare it to what we have and see what we can and can't do. But again, their finances, they don't have Mike Burke sitting here doing their finance. And so there are some things that they've done in the past that
Put a bounty on my head. Come on. No, we're looking at Dade County. We're trying to do our homework now, but it does look like there's a provision or contract that the step is not guaranteed, that's subject to bargaining each year, which is a little different. But I need to find out how it's really played
They
out.
have
That's-
it.
and that's what we had with the
Years.
teachers, and it was horrible for our teachers, because they had a step schedule that they relied upon, but the value of the step really meant nothing. It's built into this schedule, but every year you had to negotiate what the value of the step would be. Okay, we have a step schedule, but it's not really this. It's going to be whatever we negotiate. So going back to, you wanted other proposals, the 17.5 and 17.14, providing the minimum of the 3 hours if a detail or something was canceled, that is really putting a lot of burden on the school police for something that's completely out of their control. So if a school cancels an event, the school police department has nothing to do with whether they called you within 24 hours or not. They don't have any control over that, but you're asking them to provide you with 3 hours of compensation when we don't have any control over what's happening. So, again, I'd like to see some data from your side. If you can show me how many officers over the last school year were assigned to a duty and had it revoked in less than 24 hours. We have other groups, I'm thinking specifically with our deaf and hard of hearing. They can take another job. So if they're not translating for a child who wants to attend a football game or is on the football team and has to be on the sidelines signing or at the practice, there is some understanding that they could have another job, that they could be making money elsewhere. If they had gotten 24 hours notice, they could be signing for the county or for somebody who needs to go to a doctor or a hospital. So I'm not quite sure what the basis for.
Or is the same thing.
But you don't have the ability to work other jobs
Yeah,
other
we
than
do.
the school district.
Sure we do.
Sure we do.
There's plenty of overtime and spots
yeah.
out there.
Another school, I can go to another
Details.
school.
Within this district.
Yeah,
is
yeah.
what okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if you could get me some information on how many times this occurs with what frequency, so that I have some.
And it probably
some
doesn't
data.
happen as frequent, but it's, again, this is like we're trying to do. We're trying to clean up the language in some of the things that are out there. If it's not there, if it's not a written rule, we can't enforce it. That's all we're trying to do. And it doesn't happen that frequently. It's just in case it does. This way we can say to the school, okay, now you know what, you didn't give me enough notice.
Could it be possible that we could negotiate? Would you be willing to negotiate something like that? It had to be only if the police department were notified with more than 24 hours and didn't notify you.
But they're not going to notify the police
they're
department.
n-
They'd call us directly.
What happens is that
They have no idea. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, like you said, they have no idea, but we're
Yeah,
gonna. It's like charging somebody for something that they have absolutely no control over.
An outside vendor comes in and does the same thing, and it really is the exact same thing when we do the leases. If they don't notify us, they got to pay us for the 3 hours, and they don't give us 24-hour notice.
Right, because the lessee is paying you, right? It's not coming directly from the police the school police budget. This, what you're talking
No,
about,
no,
comes
no.
directly from the police.
No, it's a misunderstanding.
Okay.
A little bit of the history about this is that over the summertime, I won't mention the location and such like that, it happened a few times. I brought it to the chief of police's attention. He was very understanding about that, what had occurred when it's common policy. There are things that sometimes that don't come to the floor here that are kind of like gentleman type of agreements. I'll phrase it that way. So what would happen is that the officers would be signed up for these details, just went to the school, and were there on time at the certain location, and the shop is closed, goes to the school-based officer who says, yeah, the detail's on, goes to the evening school assistant principal, oh, that was canceled. So the evening school, administrator never told the officer, who could have told the officer he could have stayed home. So what happens is that the school police is not going to assume that bill. It's the school that's going to assume that bill because they weren't respectful enough to do. The administrator knew it was canceled, but I don't know if it was a male or female. He or she didn't convey that to the officer. He or she had two officers. They had two officers at the school. Neither one of them were conveyed. So that's where we're getting this from. Okay.
And it doesn't happen very
No,
often.
it doesn't.
We just need to have something in writing so we can have something to fall back on. That's all
Okay.
it is.
A better understanding. Thank you.
So I'm sorry, there's just a little clarification for that. And just a response, if I may, in regards to our asking for I want to paraphrase for our members at home, the getting 8-hour overtime on the 8-hour workday, which we all know right now is that, or maybe we don't all know here, I'm sorry, I apologize, is if we get a non-contract day off like we did last Friday, we have to make up those 8 hours to get to the time and a half, right?
Correct.
But what happens during that week is that from the the 32 hours to the 33 hours to the 39 hours, the schools still get billed at the same rate whether the officer's getting paid straight time or overtime. Did I say that in a way? I understand what I'm saying. I just don't know if that's coming across. They're still billing the schools at $55+ an hour when I'm only getting my straight pay. So how can that be? It's not going to cost the school district or anybody extra money because they're already billing them my overtime rate when I'm not getting it.
You want to address that?
Yeah, the schools are billed based on an average rate that includes not just the salary but also the related benefits. So FICA, Medicare, pension contribution. That's why you get to, it's 55
Right.
now?
Well, it's actually,
Or it's going up,
It's going
I think.
up.
Yeah.
But, and this is my response to that, and I know Mr. Burke, I'll say he's been here just doing this with us the last couple of years. I asked this under Mr. Ludi, and still I've never been able to get this. We would like something to be able to show us, like, I'm going to make a round figure. I don't even, say my hourly rate is $30 an hour, just argument's sake. And the things I see in my school seem to be a lot, like $55 an hour. And people all think that, just please.
Hold on, no, wait, I just want to make clear. You're talking about leases billing, not the school
Nope.
being billed for
Everything.
you being there on a daily basis.
No, this is either leases or overtime
Okay.
or a detail.
The way you said it at first, it sounded like the schools were being billed. That's why I turned to him. I was
No.
a little confused. We're billing the schools for an officer to be there? Okay, so
No,
this
so-
is just for the extra duties.
Extra, yeah, correct.
Gotcha.
Extra duty details, whether it be a lease for a church or a school activity and such.
Okay.
Is that and I say this all not to be disrespectful, we still have, my response at that time to Mr. Ludi's is that he had to do with the fact that it has to do with our insurance, that great difference in salary. So if I make $30 an hour and a building school $55, where is this $25 an hour coming from? So he said it had to do with my insurance. So that my response, which I was being a wise guy, so my insurance must be better than everybody else in the school district. So we need an explanation for that because it sounds a little bit, it's hard for our people to believe that my benefits for Kevin O'Sullivan, which I don't take the school district, are costing my school district, my school or the leasee $25 an hour. And then just finally, what we're getting very, very frustrated, even our membership, I know I'm hitting you with a lot.
No, I think what I'm hearing, and I'll let Mike speak to this.
Okay, sorry.
But the leases are built on an average. So it's some I think would be paying more, some would be paying less, and they could because they can't. Otherwise they would have to figure out okay who's going to be working that lease every single day and bill them accordingly. So I think that's built in, but I'll let them speak to that.
Ms. Knus will answer.
right. So when you have officers working the lease, just like Ms. Evans-Perret said, you have some that are beginning officers that are at a lower hourly rate. You have others that are at the top end making the highest hourly rate. So what we do is we calculate every year. We go back and look at the prior year to see what is the average hourly rate of all the officers working, and that is the average hourly rate that we bill out to the schools. Because the schools won't know whether they're going to have a first-year officer coming out or they're going to have an officer that's been there for 20 years. So it works out on average so that we're collecting the right amount of money at the end of the day, but the schools can budget and plan because they're going to have a fixed amount that they know they're going to have to pay per hour.
And then with the benefits, it's not your health insurance, but it's more your pension contribution, which overtime or these extra details count towards pension earnings. So for an officer, it's over 25%, right? What's the
It's
current?
actually 34%.
34%.
Between your FRS, FICA, and also workers' comp and unemployment.
And then are some of those duties the officers may be earning time and a half, which bumps up that rate, right?
Because overtime is at time and a half.
So therefore, you build that rate, whether it being, or you build that rate of pay all the time, whether I am getting straight time in my pocket or overtime in my pocket.
But over the course of the year, it's an average rate that we use for the school so they can plan on it. It's just a billing rate. It's not really connected directly to what the given officers earn in that day at the assignment.
What's frustrating from us and our members is that the things that we're asking for is mirroring the local agencies, what they have in their contract. I have to admit that I'm getting very frustrated because it took for years, 'cause I've been here longest than Alex, to establish a relationship with then Mr. Ludi, then he finally come to the understanding that what we're asking for are police incentives in our contract. It's not our fault that some of those police incentives were given to the other respective bargaining units here, okay? But this is what we have to come down to. We're fighting this again, and it's very frustrating. Are we going to be treated like police officers, or are we going to be treated as school board employees? It can't be both. It can't be what behooves management on this day and this time. That's what's very frustrating. And would like an explanation for our membership, because I must say, after the last round of negotiation session, we've been inundated with phone calls, and it's really great that we have this because it's educating our employees as to what goes on.
And they may be a smaller bargaining unit than the SEIU, and certainly smaller bargaining unit than the teachers. This bargaining unit protects the students and the teachers.
And I don't know that I have a good answer for you, Officer O'Sullivan, or one that you're going to like. But the truth of the matter is, I mean, we are a school district. You are a police agency, and we're going to treat you as much as we can as a police agency to keep us competitive with the outside agencies like PBSO. Can't keep up with Boca. I mean, I don't know who can keep up with Boca Police, but we're going to try and keep up with everybody else. But at the same time, as Mr. Burke has explained, our financing is so very different. So we are going to be limited. We can't give you everything that PBSO does, but we're also not having you work 12-hour shifts like PBSO does, unless you choose to for overtime purposes. We're not going to have you working, 12 months out of the year. There are a lot of benefits to working here.
We do work 12 months out of the year.
Yeah.
Well, you don't work a full 12 months.
Well,
out
we
of the
work
year.
12 months. We don't work the full month. We work
Correct,
12
and
months.
that is really something that the union asked for, so that you could get a sick leave every day.
Okay, I
right?
get it.
So you had to work 11 days a month to get the sick day,
Right.
and that was a choice that the union wanted to make so that they could spread that out so they got an extra sick day over the summer.
I understand. I just don't
So-
want to mislead the public that watches this.
Well, I don't want to mislead them
you know,
either.
that we do
So-
work 12 months a year.
You work during 12 months a year, but you are not a 12-month employee. You're not working
That's
the
correct.
260 days or 257 or whatever it is per year that others at the district do work. So to the best of our abilities, we're going to treat you like what you're calling a regular police agency, but you are housed within a school district, and that makes you very different. It makes you very important, but it's different than PBSO. And like I said, we're going to do our best to get where we need to be to retain and attract the best quality of officers that we can, but we can't do everything they do because we just aren't given enough money to do so.
And I heard the term when last week that the well is dry. Now here's what I mean is that this department's having a hard time attracting people. And when I said last time, it wasn't meant to disparage the school district. The pay's not even competitive anymore. And no matter how I keep saying this every time, the starting pay is falling. And then after that, when people ask how my raise is going to be, and I'm like, well, it really depends on how much money the state gives us. So really, there isn't a great incentive for people to really make a career here, because at the end of the day, they need to pay their bills, just like everyone who's sitting in this room. But here's a question, which I don't think we cannot compete anymore in this, or it's going to be very difficult, which people at the department is seeing, because it's very interesting that we have brand new people who are leaving, and over the summertime, I'm not being a drama queen here, is that they're going to see a hemorrhage over the summertime. So they're going to have to wake up and smell the coffee. We either got to be a police department, or what someone said to me, and I'm going to say it because it's verbatim, either the school district has to be in the policing business or out of it. And here's a question, is if we can't compete in the marketplace, what is your plan?
Well, we're going to pull the vacancy rate because you did mention that before, and I got the back of the cocktail napkin answer out in the hall, and what I'm hearing about the vacancy for this department is very different than what you're giving me. So we'll have that for next time. We'll have the actual hard data on what our vacancy rate is.
Well, I'm just saying is that I was told from somebody who does that background check is that they're having a hard time attracting people because of not being able to compete in the marketplace for these recruits and such.
And I appreciate that somebody told you that, but that's not what I'm hearing from the chief or the deputy chief.
Would you please look into the number of new hires from last year to this year, and then look into also the number of how many people either left, got fired, or
We can
or
pull all that
retired?
data for you.
Yeah, and just compare it that way.
Mary's down there keeping notes, and she'll send me an email either today or tomorrow going, Vicki, this is what you need to do for PBA.
You brought your secretary today.
No, Mary is not
No, I'm
my
here.
secretary. Mary is the HR manager
Secretary.
for labor relations.
Um,
at least the
I had
next
a
few
question.
months.
When you were going over your counter for the comp, you said something about we get comp or overtime in 3-hour blocks, and I didn't understand what you
in the
what you
contract,
meant.
it says that you can only use comp time in 3-hour blocks. I believe is what the contract says. So you can't use it for a full day or a half day. You can use 3 hours.
Okay. So
That's what I'm kind of interested to see the actual data behind that of how many officers are accruing comp time at how much do they have sitting on the books, and how frequently are they actually using it?
Well, I tell you right now, you can't have more than 24 hours of comp time at any time. So that's
Right.
going to be your max.
Okay, so I thought it was 16, but we'll look at it.
Well,
So-
16, and then with the half, at time and a half, it comes out to 24.
Okay.
All right. So, but if it's a cost savings to the district to allow the officers to be able to put this into, you were supposed to look into that if it was allowable
Like
to
I
put it
said,
to Bancorp or
we've
anything.
been working with Bancorp now for over a year trying to figure out if we can put the people who cap out on their vacation. We're not getting a lot of traction with it. I know Diane Howard is now working with them to see what we can do because we have some groups, particularly the mechanics. They're a very small group. They don't feel like they can take vacation because they're so small and there's so much work to do. So there are many of them that have capped out on vacation and they have to use it or lose it. We're telling them to go ahead and use it, but there's the idea that maybe we could take that overage for comp time and put it into Bancorp. But again, we have to determine if that's legally permissible. And especially with comp time, would we be able to do that? I don't know the answer to that. So we're having we've sent them questions. We haven't gotten responses back. And I know they're working with Diane Howard now on a variety of issues. So hopefully we'll have something at some point, but I don't know that it'll be for this round of bargaining.
Okay.
Just want to follow up on your reply to me, is that we are still to this day paying outside agencies the overtime rate to police our schools. We haven't made a dent in that. So that's another thing, is what is the sustainability of paying police officers from Palm Beach Gardens, the sheriff's office, West Palm Beach, Jupiter, I'm sure I'm missing some. So if we still have outside agencies doing our job, that's showing me that we still haven't made a dent in the hiring, enough hiring.
No, we are. You're perfectly right. We are still using them, but we have cut down on that somewhat. But until we're fully up and running with everything, I'm sure that they're going to keep them on for a little while longer so we have some flexibility. So if the officers have to be here for bargaining, we can fill in for somebody at the school.
And where is that money coming from?
That money is really, the referendum allowed us to add a lot of school police positions. I think we still have about 60 that we've never filled. So we're taking the value of the lapsed salary and benefits associated with those new positions that we're unable to fill, to use that to help pay for the contracted work through the cities.
And the
So
question
we-
becomes
so the money-
overriding. Go ahead, Mike.
So but the money's not for salaries.
It's a trade-off. So we've planned to grow to, say, don't hold me to these exact numbers, but around 250 officers. We're not there yet. We have hired quite a bit. I believe they've hired over 150 in the last 18 months, but we have lost some, not a lot, but some have retired or whatever. So we still have some gap that we're addressing with the contracted services from the various cities, and we're paying those contracts. I'm just telling you where the money came from is really looking and saying, okay, well, we still have 60 or so vacant police officers that we have not filled yet. We haven't spent the money on those salaries and benefits, so we're transferring it to cover the contract.
And that money's from where, though? Where did that, but we got money for equipment, and we got money for,
Oh, it's part of the general fund operating budget.
okay, so, and how long is that going to be sustainable to use that money to pay for outside agencies? So what I'm trying
As
to
we,
say is
as we staff up, we become less dependent on the contracted services. So I'm hoping this would be the last year of it, but I'm not certain at this point.
Just say as you staff up, and we say staff up, you mean with newer officers, right?
Well, new hires to the district, yeah, as we work to get fully staffed, right? Once we're fully staffed, we'll no longer need those contracts.
Let's take a break, fellas. All right, we're going to take 5.
Okay.
For 3 years.
Getting older.
You're so quiet, nobody knows.
Getting older.
I said the same thing. I said, someone human resources, if I'm not mistaken. I'll bear with
I
name.
thought you were a
And
numbers
just
guy.
for the
too.
record, this is Dr. Gonzalo LaCava. He's the Chief of Human Resources.
She taps me, I talk.
Gotcha.
Keep moving away, I see.
So I'm a parent of children that go to school in the district. They have a school police officer at their school. I'd like to know the answer to this question. If that police officer sees a child being beaten up at a bus stop, should he stop and do anything?
That's our problem.
I'm seeing Mr. Burke is nodding.
I'm
What
looking at-
what should he do? Should he get on the radio?
I believe the bus stop is ours. The students, when they're at the bus stop, are our responsibility.
Bus stop.
Bus stop to bus stop. So,
Well, a bus stop is not a defined bus stop like the city has with a little overcover. So the bus stop
we're defined on our school bus routes.
But in this agency, a bus, wherever it's stopped to pick up the kids or wherever the kids accumulated, that's where the bus is going to stop.
You know, we're getting all these. Why don't we do this? You guys come up with all your scenarios, get the questions to me in writing. I'll sit down with the chief, and we'll get answers for all of them.
I'm not your secretary. I'm not getting them. I'm not putting them in writing.
Okay, well, I appreciate the fact that you don't want to put anything in writing.
Well, that's
But,
not
I
what
mean-
I said. I'm not going to gather every single possible
If you-
scenario.
Yes, but
and
you're
get them
asking.
to you.
But you're giving
You
me
don't wanna
every.
answer this question.
You're asking me every possible scenario, and I'm the chief negotiator. I am not the chief of police.
Gotcha.
No, this is not the.
From
This is.
every discipline is sitting here.
This is multiple questions that I've been asked today of what about this scenario, what about that scenario, and you want an answer like that. You and I both know, Larry, as attorneys, we don't operate that way. I want all the facts, and I'm not going to just answer flippantly or have someone here at the table answer without knowing the exact answer. And so if you have questions and scenarios that your officers want to know, let us know what they are. We'll have the chief sit down with the chief and deputy chiefs and go through them and come up with answers, because these aren't about bargaining. These are about little gotchas that are trying to go on right here.
No.
And
It's
about,
about-
No, it's not. There's a very simple answer to this. Is just please have him at the next bargaining session where he can sit and answer the question so everyone can see it.
that's not what this is about. This
Sure
is not
it
a
is.
communication issue with the chief.
Oh, it's a big-time
This is
communication
about negotiating this contract. If you want to try and negotiate, then maybe about the chief being at the table as part of the bargaining team, then maybe you should have brought it up as one of your items to change.
Why should I have to change to have somebody here
Because
who's
it's
able
the
to answer
chief's-
questions?
It is the chief's responsibility to determine whether he wants to be at the table or not. So he wants to have a relationship with you, and I'm not going to speak for him, but what I've been told, he wants to have a relationship with you that's outside this, what is becoming an adversarial-like process. So you're throwing scenarios at us. All I'm asking is that you give them to me in writing. You have all these scenarios about when should I stop, what should I do about my job, and how do I do my job. If you have these questions that you're getting from your membership, get the questions to me. We'll get them to the chief, and I will have every answer for you. But to pepper us with questions that are really unrelated to what we're bargaining is a little silly. So I'd rather get you a correct answer so that your membership have all the information rather than for us to try and come up with some answer on the spot.
I don't think that this membership will think that it's silly. I do have one other item to mention to you.
Okay.
Which is regarding the step plan. And that is in an effort not to bargain against ourselves, but in the spirit of getting us closer, we would not be opposed to, if we could get into a step framework, we would not be opposed to, whether it's annually or every 2 years, renegotiating the numbers. At least people would have an idea as to where they fit in and are able to plan their futures. We want to have a framework. That's even more important currently than the specific numbers. I just want you to know that.
Okay, and we'll take that back to leadership and to the board.
And just so you know, this is not a matter of coming up with every fictional or mythological hypothetical.
No, I know they're real hypotheticals, but to expect me, and I'm not a police officer, I'm a lawyer who works as a chief negotiator and handles discipline.
You're sitting at a table with others. There's a
Correct.
reason there's a bargaining team.
There is, but I'm not comfortable having team members just answer questions that I'm not sure we have all the specifics, because what I've seen happen in these bargaining sessions is the question is asked, this is the scenario, the question is asked, it is answered, and then the scenario is changed a little bit and it keeps tweaking a little bit. All I'm asking is if you guys have these scenarios that you're getting from your membership, bring them to us and we'll certainly let the chief see them and answer them. And I will let him know that you've invited him to come to bargaining.
I don't think we're also trying to be adversarial by any means. By any means. I don't think that's, I mean, I think we're all grown-up people here realize that arguing back and forth isn't going to get us any further. I think we're getting frustrated as you're getting frustrated over some things that we consider simple that you don't understand, and some of the things you're telling us we don't understand. And it's just unfortunately the way it is. I wish we can sit here and sing Kumbaya, but that's not, it's not happening. We're still trying to get somewhere, and you're trying to get somewhere, and we're trying to meet in the middle now. So one other thing on a mutual aid thing, I think it's a little misunderstood on that part too. Mutual aid that we do go between agencies is a written agreement based on if we are ever going to have to use each other again, we don't have to worry about writing something up. If I need to ask West Palm Beach to cover some of our schools, that's what we did it all in the beginning of the year. So we have a contract that we can give to every agency, okay? And it explains the mutual aid right then and there. I don't need to call them before I intervene in a violent crime. Okay, that's not going to happen. You're going to react. You're going to call on the radio and tell them what you're doing, and that's calling our people and tell them, hey, look, I'm in the middle. I got something going on. I'm not going to stand there and wait to get a response from somebody. We're going to do our job as police officers. That's the mutual aid. The understanding of calling and getting a response from somebody, that's when it's pre-planned or predetermined that you're going to need something. If FAU needs us to help cover football games, we have a MOU with them that they can call us and say, hey, can we request some of your officers? Palm Beach Gardens, the same thing.
Or their resources.
Their resources.
If
that's
the eagle
yes.
from the sheriff. That's what the mutual aid agreement is.
So I think that's, we just need to be aware that's more of a mutual aid than it is us standing on the side of the road and calling for somebody to come to assist us in stopping a crime from being committed.
All right, so by way of recap, one, we have 2 more sessions that I see are already scheduled.
Correct.
One end of next week, I think Thursday, and then one the following week. As far as those specific items in Article 17, the comp time you are researching for, I guess.
Well, like I said, as putting it into some kind of Bencor account, that's not going to be an answer that we're going to get in the next month. I don't anticipate getting. I've been already working for a year on that.
No, you were talking about
Right.
You didn't know, you had just realized how this agency will, as spur of the moment.
Correct.
Okay, so you said you're looking into that.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know. Is that something we'd have an answer next week?
I don't know. I may need more information from you. If I need it, I will get questions to you.
Feel free to ask. And
The only one other quick thing, I'm sorry, Larry. What was the negativity about us being able to do that too?
Well, it was just shocking to us because that's not how we. in order to budget for overtime, let's say, you're going to figure out an estimate of how much time a person's going to be taking, as a, given the different activities, the football games, all that kind of stuff. So that all is calculated out to determine what your overtime budget would be for the year. So if the officers are using comp time, that's not necessarily calculated into the budget for overtime purposes if it's not going to be paid out that year. So it's one of those things that we're going to have to look at of how that's being done now in the school police.
Can we do it the same way as just go back over the years gone by and look at how much comp time and average it out, just like we do with how much the $55 an hour?
Yeah, but see what you're saying, though, is right now, from what I understand, it's very limited how many hours you can have, and you're going to
we're only allowed 24 hours.
Right, so you're going to increase that. Is your 60 based on time and a half, or is it 60 straight?
I just didn't understand what you just said about it not being able to anticipate like what the overtime rate is going to be. Either way, at the end of the year, you're paying it out, whether you're paying it out in cash or whether you're paying it into a bank core account.
Well, no, because that's not what the original proposal was. The original proposal was you had said it would be 60 and it would roll from year to year to year. So that's something we have to.
No.
That's a proposal we have to.
You said reoccurring.
Yeah, reoccurring.
No, the reoccurring meant throughout the year. You can reoccur as you used time. You can, just the way it is now, we can bank 48 hours.
So how we term that is you're maxed out at 60.
Correct.
That's what it is. It's not when you
60.
say when you're recurring, it's going for a recurring thing is every year.
I can see the confusion.
Not from
Like, for example,
Didn't mean to roll
maybe to
over.
simplify things,
Okay,
like
so it doesn't roll over.
no, we
Okay.
have 24 hours. We're maxed out right now, say argument's sake, and you take 5 hours off, just argument's sake. You're down to 19 hours. You can replenish that back up to the 24. That's all.
Okay, no, that's the way
By
comp
year
time
end,
is for
yeah.
the entire district.
Okay.
The
So then we're not
surprise for us was that you're not required to pick one or the other.
No, we're required to either use it or it gets paid
Well,
out
it's
at the end
done
of
the
the year.
same way with other units here,
Yeah.
but they have to select. You don't get overtime if you choose to get comp time.
Well, but it's a little bit different too because those other units are using those comp for days like they know they have an after-school event, they have a night school, or they're opening house, and they want the teachers to stay, or they want somebody to stay, so they're offering them comp time. And they know that on their calendar ahead of time.
It's built into their contracts, but
Yeah.
there's other units that I'm talking about, particularly like a secretary or a clerk at a school. They select whether
Well,
they want comp time or overtime. They don't get both.
See, our overtime is spur of the moment sometimes.
Right, and that's why-
We have an event, they were expecting 50 people to show up. Next thing you know, there's 500, and they need 3 more officers right away. So
And sometimes in other positions, it's very different than what you indicated, but there could be something that went on at a school that required the data processor, I'm just throwing this out there, to stay later because of something.
yeah. No, but the original...
So that's why it's a little different with your unit because you're a much bigger unit that uses overtime than anyone else. So we just want to make sure we have hard data to look at to determine, one, do we have a lot of officers that are capped at the 16 or 24? Are there a lot of officers capped there? And if they are, or if they're not, if there's not a lot of officers, then why do we need to increase it? So that's the numbers that I'm looking at.
Bottom line, it was supposed to look into saving the district and assisting the officers too. So that's the way it was proposed. It was proposed as at the end of the year where the district was going to have to pay out if it wasn't used, the officer could roll it into, if you recall.
Right, we talked about possibility of rolling it into Bangor.
Well, first it was sick, and then it was you guys weren't sure if that could be statutory done.
Right.
And then it was brought up. Okay, well, what about a Bangor? So, bottom line is that it was going to be a savings to the district, especially if it was being able to roll over into a sick or to a what was the other one? It's sick or personal days inside there, because paid out if it was paid out. According to the way the contracts were in, according to the statute, by years of service, you'd get a 45%, 50% if you cashed it out when you left. You understand what
I understand what you're saying. There's just a lot of calculations to figure that out. So we've got to run the numbers. I can't take it to the board without showing that whether this is cost neutral or it's going to cost money. So we're going to have to do that work behind it to figure all of that out.
We have given you our interest in the framework of returning to a step plan where The members can have more control over what their future is and their families in an effort to maintain good officers and attract good officers, not just have somebody that fills the uniform. We talked about another county that, not necessarily other police agencies, but another school district in another county that is able to do that.
Right, but the steps are not guaranteed. We
hear
just
you.
so it's
So
it's
what
a
I'm-
framework
Okay.
that has a very high probability of not coming to pass. Because it says even if we built their framework, we took your framework exactly, but took Miami-Dade's language, you're not getting 5%. You're getting whatever money we have available as we negotiate it. So the step plan may show 5% from one step to the next, but according to Dade's language, the value of that step is renegotiated every year.
I got you.
So even though we're making this promise, like if I just take yours, that at 10 years you're going to be making $44.5 an hourly rate, $44.51 per hour, it may come to pass that due to funding that they're really making $38.04 or 05, which is really where they would be at 7, that they haven't moved in 3 years, or they've moved, but it's only been 50 cents an hour or something. So it's, as Mr. Burke said, it's really dangerous to do something like this
I'm
because
trying to convey the willingness to get into some type of framework is very important to this membership.
okay, and I understand
I
that.
can't say that enough.
I completely understand it. It's just as much as you are saying that your members are pushing you towards a step plan, I think we're going to get the same amount of push, if not more, to not go backwards from where we were before, because we bargained it out of the contract for a reason.
Well, if the overtures, we're looking at hiring or having 250 officers, if the overtures are truly to get a traditional component into this police department and not just have security guards, I would think that they would want to look at what the industry standard is going back to. And they'll look at it if you show it to them and let them know our interest is more than casual and is more than for effect. It's real, and the numbers are negotiable.
I heard you. Anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay, well then we'll see you on the 12th.
We'll see you then.